Good morning and happy Tuesday, everyone. I hope that you're well this morning. As always, if you're watching us within the East African region or the entire globe, it is good to see you and thank you very much. This is your world. And my name is Winnie Lubembe. Now, malaria is a preventable and treatable disease that continues to have a devastating impact on the health and livelihood of people around the world. And according to the 2021 World Malaria Report, global progress in reducing malaria cases and deaths have slowed or stalled in recent years, particularly in countries hardest hit by the disease. And Kenya, however, has seen national burden of malaria reduced by 50% in the last decade, from 11% in 2010 to 6% in 2020. So what does this mean for us and to achieve a malaria-free world? Is it time to change the tactics in the fight against the disease? We'll find out shortly. President Kenyatta leads nation in viewing former President Mwai Kibaki's body that will lie in state for 3 days. Jimmy Kibaki shares fond memories of his father and to announce his political plans soon. Nations across the world marked Malaria Day yesterday. Is it time to change tactics in malaria war? We discuss that in today's discussion. And the Health Ministry says it aims to scale the uptake of the malaria vaccine among children. Well, before we delve into today's conversation, we recognize that the country is in mourning. This follows the demise of the country's third president, Emilio Stanley Mwai Kibaki. Kenyans have been given a chance to pay their last respect by viewing the body of the late President Kibaki. And as NTV, we continue to give you a wall-to-wall coverage on the events leading up to his burial. I'm not alone in studio. Olive Barrows is with me, while our reporters are stationed in various areas of the country, including our senior reporters, that is Leila Mohammed, as well as Kennedy Mureithi here in Nairobi, who will be giving us live updates during the show. But for now, Olive, of course, it's a very, very sad moment, I would say, in the country. And of course, it's just something about death as far as the finality of the same, especially when you get to view the body. So, of course, I understand that so many Kenyans would want to go and view the body. What are some of the things that, maybe they need to know before making that decision to actually go to Parliament?
All right, I'll start off by saying this is the second day that Mwai Kibaki is lying in state at Parliament's precincts. Yesterday, we saw dignitaries led by the President, Uhuru Kenyatta, the First Lady, the Deputy President, attend that event. We also heard from the family, as you mentioned in your highlights. So they viewed the body yesterday. After that, it was opened to members of the public. People are still signing condolence books. In fact, as Leila Mohammed, you mentioned, is in Parliament and followed the cortege from the Lee Funeral Home. Leila, we have her on right now. Leila, are there people already lined up to view the body?
Well, good morning, Olive. Good morning, Winnie. It has been the second day of an early morning for many Kenyans, including the members of the Kenya Defence Forces, who by 5:30 a.m. were already at the Lee Funeral Home. The gun carrier was at standby to receive the body of the late Mzee Mwai Kibaki. The pallbearers also there, and 3 outriders, who are now parked just next to the gun carrier itself. Many have been asking questions around it. Why this particular vehicle? How does it look like? What does the symbolism of much that has adorned this particular vehicle is all about? This is a significant feature that many Kenyans will see going forward for the next 48 hours or so, up until Friday, when this gun carrier will travel from State House, Nairobi, all the way to Nyayo National Stadium for one last lap, where Mwai Kibaki will be honored in a state funeral this particular day, because it is the second day. The funeral motorcade left the Lee Funeral Home quite early at 6:20 a.m., snaking down the roundabout at the Silver Springs Hotel, DOD Valley Road, down into Kenyatta Avenue, as well as Uhuru Highway, and snaking into this vicinity just a few minutes to 7 a.m. This is a tradition that will happen also tomorrow, which is the last day of viewing of the body. This day will be quite simpler for many Kenyans, because most dignitaries had already conducted that viewing of the body yesterday, led by President Uhuru Kenyatta. One significant feature, Winnie and Olive, that we've seen this morning is the special forces were present at the Lee Funeral Home. They are also present here. It's just the National Army honoring a former commander-in-chief, with the Kenya police officers also standing by on guard. This particular road, Parliament Road, will be blocked off until maybe 6 p.m. tomorrow, which is the last day. Not much activity will be here. Only dignitaries will be allowed to access this vicinity. So once the body was driven into the precincts of Parliament, it was accorded again another ceremony that's similar to what happened yesterday. There were chaplains from the Catholic, the Protestant, and the Muslim fraternity of the Kenya Defence Forces, who were here on hand to receive the body. And then there was a guard of honor again laid on behalf or in honor of a former commander-in-chief. This also happened. They went to stand by in line, flanking the sidelines of the walk into the main entrance of Senate, where the pallbearers removed the body from the gun carrier, putting it onto a special moving rack, and just to enable them to move the body at ease. There is the red carpet that is still here, and the military presence will also be a big factor, with the band of the Kenya Defence Forces, the Kenya Army, the Kenya Navy, and the Kenya Air Force being here. There's also the presence of the National Youth Service. So this will be particularly an interesting day, where Kenyans will be able to see the body of the late Mzee Kibaki quite early. Yesterday we took you through where Kenyans will be lining up. They are expected to start lining up from the roundabout of City Hall Way, snaking their way up until the roundabout of the Holy Family Basilica. They will be standing there in guard and coming in lines slowly, as they are being vetted and looked after at the main entrance, just where Mzee Jomo Kenyatta lies at his mausoleum, which also has the flags that flank the entrance flying at half-mast. Also there, that's when now they will be taking the line down into the main entrance of Senate, where they will be accessing the insides of this particular vicinity. This is a tradition that Kenya has borrowed from its colonial masters, of course, tweaking it a bit according to how now the military finds their traditions within the Kenyan systems or the African settings. The body will lie in state for another 48 to 70 to 48 to 56 hours or so. By 5 p.m., it will be expected to go back to the Lee funeral. One key factor that we saw at President Daniel Moi's laying in state was the fact that every single day he was dressed in a different suit, different shoes, and the traditional flower, the red rosebud on his jacket, I hear, was being picked freshly every morning, just as he did when he was alive at the area, the walk where the body will be laid, lying on top of his presidential standard. There are various paraphernalia, things that he took close to his heart, and one significant factor are his golf clubs. He was a big golf player. His books, the ones he liked to read, the favorite authors, as well as the red tunic, the #1 ceremonial dress that all commander-in-chiefs are prepared for once they begin or the end their service. He was driven out of the DOD when he was leaving in 2013 at a specific ceremony that we will be able to witness later this year when President Uhuru Kenyatta is being accorded a similar fashion, where there will be prayers, there will be a luncheon, and there will be gifts given to a commander-in-chief who has served the Defense Forces for a 10-year run. And then the highlight of the event is when he will be coming on top of the commander-in-chief's vehicle and being driven out, not literally being driven out, but he will be pulled out by senior commanders of the Kenya Defense Forces. This was what happened in 2013 to Mwai Kibaki. We are expecting the same in 2022 when Uhuru Kenyatta will be leaving the reins and being accorded such military functions. So, Olive, the day has just begun. The sun is out. It looks like it's going to be a beautiful and sunny day to honor President Mwai Kibaki. A lot is expected to happen. Kenyans are also expected to come here early, like has been the tradition yesterday and the day and the previous time when Moi was being honored in lying in state like this. Several roads have been closed off for minutes just to allow the motorcade to snake its way smoothly up until where we are at here at Parliament Buildings. Olive.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Leila. Those images of the procession making its way down Valley Road, and they left the Lee funeral home at about 6:30 this morning. Kenyans were advised by the head of the police, by the police spokesman, Bruno Shioso, that there would be some traffic, some roads affected by that procession, leading to some snarl up, but it appears to have cleared. So there you have it, images of that, of the late retired President Mwai Kibaki's remains being moved from the Lee funeral home, making its way to, you can see that image on your screen there, making its way to Parliament's precincts. As Leila Mohammed mentioned, today is the second day. She's also given us a bit of interesting insight in terms of, she tells us that when the late retired President Moi was lying in state, he wore a different suit, or rather he was attired in a different suit for each of the days. So presumably that will be the case today as well. Several dignitaries attended yesterday. I'm not certain how many more will attend today, but it is open to members of the public. She's told us how Kenyans will be lining up from City Hall Way to make their way into Parliament precincts to pay their last respects. There are, of course, condolence books across the country, including his Othaya rural home, and more specifically the CDF offices in Othaya. So that is what is transpiring so far as the nation prepares for Friday, when a funeral service will be held at the Nyayo National Stadium, and thereafter he'll be buried on Saturday, April the 30th at his Othaya home in Nyeri County. So I believe that's what we have for now, but we have correspondents across the country receiving the last respects, rather, covering how Kenyans remember the late Mwai Kibaki. He's been lauded as a great economist. Kenyans saying his term in office was markedly different than that of today's, given the economic struggle some are facing on account partly of the COVID-19 pandemic. So, Winnie, we keep an eye on that. I hand over to you now, but we'll be back every half hour with an update.
All right, thank you very much, Oliver. Of course, if you're planning to go to Parliament, of course, to pay your last respects to the fallen statesman, that is the late President Mwai Kibaki, then you better do so before 5:30 p.m. because, as Leila told us, at exactly 5:30 p.m., the body leaves to Lee Funeral Home. And, of course, tomorrow is the last day. So, of course, better make arrangements for the same. But, of course, before we go back to Leila and, of course, together with a battery of journalists who are, stationed across different parts of the country, just to give you an update of the events leading to the burial of the former president, that is Mwai Kibaki. Let's take a look at what happened yesterday. And Kenyans from all walks of life streamed into Parliament buildings yesterday to pay their last respects to their former president Mwai Kibaki, who passed on late last week. The procession brought color to the streets of Nairobi Monday morning, where the gun carrier bearing the casket draped in the national flag arrived at Parliament buildings at 7:30 a.m. and was received by the two speakers of both houses. Leila Mohammed brings us all the color, moments and memories of Kenyans who thronged Parliament as their head of state lies in state.
Just before the break of dawn, the pallbearers and servicemen tasked with the duty of escorting the body of their former commander-in-chief arrived at the Lee Funeral Home with military police in line to receive the party and ensure that traffic along that section of the road had minimal interruption. Draped in the national flag, the casket bearing the remains was mounted on the gun carriage at 6:45, the procession leaving slowly down Valley Road, Kenyatta Avenue, Uhuru Highway, finally snaking its way onto Parliament Road, where it was deposited at the entrance to Senate. The motorcade was accompanied by pallbearers, officers of the rank of colonel led by a brigadier into the presence of Parliament, right after a guard of honor had been mounted in honor of the departed former commander-in-chief. The gun carriage drove into a corner of Parliament as the entourage walked into the House to be met by the speakers. The vehicle, green in color, together with the carriage attached at the back, had red carpets lining the insides of the vehicle. On one side of the carriage was the presidential standard that characterized Mwai Kibaki's presidency. On the other, the national flag flew with a plate of similar colors, dotted with 5 stars placed at the area where the vehicle's number plate is supposed to be. The stars, a symbol of Kibaki's rank within the defense forces, Kenya's 5-star general during his tenure in office as the commander-in-chief of the country's defense forces. As the casket was rolled into the House, with the guard of honor flanking the sides, the Chief of Defense Forces, General Robert Kibochi, led senior military generals behind the chaplains in a march to give their former commander-in-chief his final salute. Inside the Speaker's Walk, a special table draped in the former president's presidential standard was where the body would be placed over the course of the day. Officers guarding the body stood at each of the 4 corners looking away from the body with their heads slightly bowed in respect and their swords firmly in the grip of their hands, ready to defend a fallen soldier, even in death. After the President and the First Lady viewed the body of the late President, Kenyans from all walks of life thronged Parliament to view the body of a man who ruled the nation for a 10-year period. Each one holding fond memories of what the man meant to them, many speaking of how his decision to grant free access to education to all Kenyan children gave them a second chance at life.
I'm just a beneficiary of a free primary education. So that is why I've just come to pay our last respect.
Kuna mambo ambayo amefanya sana hii Kenya ambayo hatuwezi tukayapuuzia.
Nafanya hii kazi sababu yake. Bodaboda, mapikipiki, Kibaki ndiye aliweza kutuletea mapikipiki.
Na jameni, Uhuru anafaa ajifunze one lesson or two from the late Mzee Kibaki.
Over the next 2 days, the body will be lying in state, a tradition in which the body of a deceased official is placed in a state building, either outside or inside a coffin, to allow the public to pay their respects. Leila Mohammed, NTV.
Well, thanks, Lila. Of course, Lila is holding fort for us at Parliament. But still on the former President Mwai Kibaki's story, and his son Jimmy Kibaki is now considering running for political office in the 2022 general election. Jimmy, who has promised to make an official statement to this effect, remembers his father as Kenya's property, adding that his father was more concerned about seeing an equal society where the needs of everyone are catered for. NTV's senior political affairs reporter Kennedy Mureithi caught up with Jimmy and now brings to the fore reflections of his father's political and family life. Take a look.
The country is mourning. Remembering a man many describe as a statesman and is credited with turning around the fortunes of the nation. The family has lost its pillar. To them, he was not just a president, he was their everything.
So my greatest memory of him is that whenever he had the opportunity in government, he used that opportunity to better the lives of Kenyans. His was actually a truly selfless leadership style.
I remember him as a great leader, a great father, a great grandfather, a mentor to me, and even unto my family.
Jimmy Kibaki, however, notes most of his father's time was spent in politics, and as a family, they had made peace with the fact that they had to share him with the country.
You know, from the time I was born, my father has been in politics. So to ask me what is the greatest memory is asking me to stretch my mind back 58 years. But if you see the outpouring of people here, people who have come to pay their last respects to Mzee, you realize that he touched the lives of millions and millions of Kenyans.
He says the former president's health had been failing for a while, and for some time now, he had become a frequent visitor to the hospital.
Mzee has not been very well for the last 2 years or so, maybe 3 years. So, you know, there was a lot of focus on his health, how to make him as comfortable as possible, also given his advanced age.
At Parliament precincts, apart from the country's third president remains lying in state, what he loved most was displayed. This included his golf club that Jimmy says he loved so much. Books that the former head of state loved reading, including a book written on the country's 2008 mediation that saw him and ODM party leader Raila Odinga reconcile after a hotly contested general election. Next to his body was his red tunic that was given to him on 22nd March 2013 when he retired.
When he retired in 2013, which is 50 years later, for the first time in my life, I had him all to myself. I could go and visit him at home or in his office at any time because, you know, now he had retired. And even for him, in his retirement, he wanted to focus more on the family and especially on his grandchildren.
But even as Jimmy remembers his father, whom he acknowledges has known no other life other than politics, does he or anyone in his family intend to run for political office?
To tell you the truth, I've been under a lot of pressure the last 5 years. And most of that pressure comes from people who have been missing Mzee or seeing Mzee out there in the political arena. So there are a lot of people who would want to see my family back involved in active politics.
Jimmy Kibaki is currently the deputy party leader of the New Democrats Party, which is part of the Azimio One Kenya party under the One Kenya Alliance.
I am actually kind of seen as a political frontman for the family now. And yes, there has been a lot of pressure. And let us get over this period of mourning, and we'll be making some statements after that.
I remember him as a great leader of this country, and we hope, even through his son Jimmy, that he can continue with the banner and maybe the void that Mzee has left. It might be hard, but I know he'll do it. He can do it.
And I very much look forward to your time and to that one-on-one interview with you about Kennedy Mureithi, NTV. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Kennedy. And just like any other leader, the late President Mwai Kibaki appointed to government men and women who would see his vision for a better Kenya brought to life. Dr. Chris Ndarathi Murungaru was one of them. The former powerful internal security minister would later be brought down by the infamous Anglo-leasing scandal. In an exclusive interview, NTV's Melita Oletenges speaks to Dr. Murungaru as he shares reflections of the Kibaki government and the Anglo-leasing scandal.
Christopher Murungaru, a former prime minister in Kibaki's government, was first appointed to the internal security docket in 2003 before being transferred to the transport docket in 2005, has been away from the limelight after his retirement from active politics. He remembers Kibaki as a liberal leader.
He gave you a free hand. He let you perform your duties without undue interference, without looking over your shoulder. All he expected were regular updates of how far you had gone.
And when things did not go as planned, like the 2005 humiliating referendum defeat, where the late President Kibaki and his allies, including Murungaru, voted in favor of a new constitutional dispensation, the president dissolved his cabinet.
It became almost impossible for the president to implement his agenda. And so he had to let go those who did not agree with him. He had to let them go. I personally felt that he did what he needed to do at the time.
Murungaru was thereafter appointed to the transport ministry, but pressure piled on him to resign following his implication in the multi-billion Anglo-leasing scandal, together with the then Justice Minister Kiraitu Murungi and Finance Minister David Malaria.
I shouted myself hollow during the Anglo-leasing scandal furor in the country, but nobody wanted to listen. All these contracts that were called Anglo-leasing were conceived, some executed during the Moi era.
The court has since directed the former governance permanent secretary John Gidongo to pay Murungaru 27 million shillings for defamation in relation to the Anglo-leasing scandal.
And the judge agreed with me, and hence the decision. But managing a country is like fighting a war. There will always be casualties. Not every soldier who goes to war comes home. So if Kenya was better for my being a casualty, so be it. I'm grateful to have had the opportunity to make myself a casualty for the betterment of the country.
He had only served for 3 years in Kibaki's government's first term.
So I was not a bitter person for exclusion from government, but I was bitter for the reasons that were manufactured.
However, he says his exit from cabinet came about after a sit-down with Kibaki, and it didn't affect their personal relationship.
Other than him being my boss in government, he was also my friend, and we have been friends for many years. We shared many Tusker exports and white caps over about 2 decades before we went into government. So there were no inhibitions between us. We agreed. He persuaded me and I was persuaded that the only way is for some of this furor to settle down, and in order not to jeopardize government programs and activities, is my absence from government.
He recounts Kibaki's sense of humor. For instance, a time when the then local government minister, Karisa Maitha, wanted to evacuate street families in Nairobi.
Minister from Mombasa, that is Karisa Maitha. He was minister for local government at the time, and he wanted to to clear the streets of street families.
Just like Kibaki, Murungaru retired to a quiet life in Nyeri, involving himself in business and agriculture.
Maida said, of course, I am very careful because we do not know who the fathers of these street children are. And Kibaki said, na ni kweli, nikikuangalia naona moja wawili kona ya Moi Avenue na Kenyatta Avenue hapo. Niliona moja wawili hapo. So he could come up with a joke to lighten the mood.
Milita, Oletenges, NTV.
And at just 29 years of age, the late President Mwai Kibaki caught his first whiff of politics and never looked back. This after leaving his job as an assistant lecturer at Makerere University in Uganda in 1960. The footsteps of a young Kibaki have inspired many in today's generation of young people who are also nostalgic about the impact they experienced of the president at a tender age. Ngena Kirori sat down with a few youth to hear more about their perspective of the late former president.
A lot has been said about the death of the former president Mwai Kibaki, whose legacy has triggered fond memories and seen beautiful tributes, according to the late economist who took over after 24 years of a Moi era. But just what did the presidency look from the eyes of young Kenyans who were toddlers at the time Kibaki was sworn in? Helen Mwangi was 9 years old and in class 3 at the time. She recalls the news being broken over the radio and a sense of euphoria following thereafter when Kibaki was sworn in as the third president.
I am from Nyeri. I schooled my entire primary school in Odaya, which is Kibaki's hometown. Yeah, so for me, I'd say that we really felt the difference. Actually, the first time that we actually saw electricity in my village was after Kibaki was president.
And as Kibaki began his first term, the struggle to pay school fees for basic education came to an end with the introduction of free primary education.
Here we started getting books from the school free of charge, and so many other things that were changing. The fact that my parents could not be paying school fees.
So much of the illicit juice. So you find that some of the parents, they have neglected their children. So you find a child young as he is, he's opting to get into farming or even going to those vibaruas so that now they can get a source of income. But now when came with the Kibaki regime, I can remember, now children starting to transit now into schools.
28-year-old Joshua Mutwiri says that Kibaki's illustrious political career is a challenge to the youth of this generation to grab leadership positions that influence great change.
Being taken to be the finance minister and later coming to other ministries like home affairs. I think it's something to youth to start thinking about future even at this early age.
However, he noted that the dark post-election violence period left a mark on the legacy of the former president and that lessons need to be learnt on how to subtract tribalism from the politics equation.
Something that was a bit disturbing and it was not a good thing.
And in the words of an unknown author, if we don't teach our children to connect with history, then the consequences for our society could be disastrous.
I think a young person should care about Mwai Kibaki because he really shaped the history of the country. He'll always be in the history books, that's for sure, and on the positive and all the good history books, because like for me, we experienced the free education.
And for many, the ingenious and humorous phrases synonymous with the late Kibaki form part of their memories of him.
I think for me, the favorite phrase was the Mavia Kuku. Like it used to come in anywhere, you do anything bad, Mavia Kuku and everything.
Hakuna haja. Hakuna haja. Yeah, there is no need.
Young people now say that the new era of leadership, to be voted in on August 9th, 2022, should borrow a leaf from Kibaki's leadership style, terming him a selfless technocrat and economist who put politics aside and put his focus on the job. Ngena Kirori, NTV.
Hakuna haja. Indeed, all of us have a way of remembering the fallen statesman. That is former President, the late Mwai Kibaki. And of course, like we said earlier on, our reporters are different locations here in the country. And of course, we'll be joining them during the show to just give us live updates as far as the events. And of course, right here in Nairobi, as we all know, the body of the late former President Mwai Kibaki is in Parliament. And of course, it is lying in state for 3 days. And of course, tomorrow is the last day. And of course, this are live pictures. And this is on Parliament Road as Kenyans are lining up to go and pay their last respects. And that is to former President, the late Mwai Kibaki. Remember, of course, it will be open exactly 9 a.m. where Kenyans will be allowed to go into Parliament to view the body and pay their last respects. But exactly at 5:30 p.m., the body will return to, or will be returned rather, to Lee Funeral Home. So if you're planning to make your way to Parliament, make sure you do so before 5:30 p.m. Of course, we'll be joining Leila Mohammed in just a few minutes to give us, updates on the same. But let's focus a bit on the conversation of the day. And the Ministry of Health aims to scale the uptake of the malaria vaccine among children aged between 6 months to 14 years. The vaccine has seen a significant decline in the number of infections among children, especially those from 8 endemic counties. This comes as malaria is estimated to cause 260,000 deaths of children under 5 years. As Kenya commemorated the World Malaria Day in Kakamega County yesterday, the Health Ministry pledged to set aside 800 million shillings in the fight against malaria.
Kenya's malaria prevalence has reduced by 50% in the last decade. This is according to the Ministry of Health, which further says that the disease burden within the lake endemic zone has significantly declined.
Despite the high prevalence in this region, the region collectively at 19%, we recognized that there has been a significant drop in the malaria disease burden, which was 27% in 2015.
Malaria prevalence in Kakamega County has reduced from 38% in 2015 to 15.2% in 2020. This is according to the Kenya Malaria Indicator Survey. Malaria incidences has reduced from 438 cases per 1,000 population in 2015 to 295 per 1,000 population in 2021.
But while this is the case, more still needs to be done in the control and prevention efforts so as to fully eliminate malaria by the year 2030. According to Africa CDC, there is an estimated 3.5 million new clinical cases and 10,700 deaths each year, with the Western Belt and Nyanza region having a high prevalence burden for the disease. Further, at least 260,000 children under the age of 5 die from malaria. Some of the affected counties include Kisumu, Kakamega, Busia, Vihiga, Bungoma, Siaya, Migori, and Homa Bay. With this year's celebration theme being Tumalize Malaria, Tuimarishe Jamii na Usawa kwa Wote. The introduction of the malaria vaccine, introduced in phases in 2019 in Kenya, Malawi, and Ghana, continues to play a key role in the fight against malaria. Since then, more than 750,000 doses of the vaccine have been administered to children in 8 endemic counties. 275,000 Kenyan children have received at least 1 out of the 4 scheduled doses of the vaccine, while over 45,000 children have received the entire course of the 4 doses.
The Ministry of Health will scale up the malaria vaccine to all sub-counties in Kakamega and in the malaria endemic lake region by June this year.
Those eligible for the vaccine are now children aged 6 months to 14 years. The ministry has further allocated 800 million shillings to boost the fight against malaria in the country. Helen Aura, NTV.
All right, thanks Helen Aura for that. And of course, now let's delve into the conversation. Yesterday was commemorated yesterday, but let's get more on the same in terms of where are we at as a country and what does this mean? Would we say the country has experienced a 50% reduction? This is in the cases of malaria, a decade later. And of course, to help us with the conversation, we have Dr. George Githuka, who's the head of Division National Malaria Control Program, joining us via Zoom. And of course, we also have Dr. Dr. Prosper Chaki, Executive Director, African Mosquito Control Association, that is PAMCA, joining us via Zoom as well. And then in studio, I have John Kamau Mwangi, Lead Kenya Malaria Youth Army. Thank you very much, John, for coming by this morning. Travel all the way from Kakamega. But thank you very much for coming today. And of course, later on, we'll also be joined by Lynette Jendeka Kamadi, who's a community health worker as well. She'll be joining us via Zoom. But John, let me just start with you. Of course, we have come a long way really as a country as far as the fight against malaria. We have experienced a 50% reduction in terms of the cases. But really, what does this say? What does this mean?
I think you're heading the right direction. From the KMIS 2020, you will see that Kenya's prevalence of malaria came from 8% all the way to 6%, meaning that we are doing the right thing and we're heading the right direction. I think what is needed is vigilance against the fights towards the elimination of malaria. And for this is the time that we involve the young people, especially myself, and invite all others around our country. The Kenya Malaria Youth Army is a cohort of young people which was born out of the President Uhuru Kenyatta's very ambitious agenda. He is the current ALMA chair, and from this we got to recruit young people from all over Kenya. And for the last 9 months, we have been championing towards the elimination of malaria. This will help us to make greater steps towards elimination of malaria.
But the question is, how exactly are the youth involved? And just recently I was speaking to someone who says, you know, we've had this question about sleeping under a treated mosquito net, do this, do that. But we still have cases of malaria. So when we talk about the youth and taking that center stage, you know, just to make sure that then they contribute towards the fight of the same, how exactly can they contribute? Just in case someone is watching us and thinking, you know what, I actually want to be part of this.
I think for us, we've made great steps to get out that message. Make sure that people sleep under treated mosquito nets. And one of the ways we have been able to do this is social media. You'll get to see that social media has a direct impact to the community, where every youth has an access to a telephone, social media. So if every youth gets that message that you're supposed to sleep under treated mosquito net, he will tell maybe the mother or the father or maybe somebody who really needs to get that message. So one of the ways to do that is through innovation. And innovation, social media is in existence. So driving out that message to the community is what we are championing for.
So social media is one of the ways that you're using to do the same. But then again, you know, like we said, malaria it's preventable and it's treatable, you know, at the same time. But it's just sad to see that 260,000 deaths, that is a lot. So the question is then, what are we not doing right? Because yes, the government might be doing its part, you might be doing your part, for example, as young people, but still people are dying from the same. So what exactly is it that then we're not doing right, that we need to put more emphasis, you know, on the same?
I think what needs to be done is get the right information to the people. If you maybe suspect you have a symptom, maybe the fever, you have a headache, you have diarrhea and all that, the first thing you need to do is visit a health facility so that you can get tested, then get treated for malaria. I think last year we got to lose a very great athlete of our time, and he died due to cerebral malaria, and this was quite sad. The reason why this happened is because I think he never had the information of how to go about this. So I think if we get the information to the people, this is what you're supposed to do when you get these symptoms. Go to the health facilities. The other ways you can do this is by eliminating or preventing, clearing the bushes in the community. Make sure that the flooded waters are cleared. Make sure that people sleep under treated mosquito nets. Make sure that pregnant mothers in the lake endemic regions, coast endemic, go to ANC clinic visits and are given the IPTP doses so that they can be able to prevent the parasites from interfering with the placenta. Yeah, I think getting the message out there is what is important. Yeah.
All right. But then again, when it comes to malaria itself and just getting to understand how bad it can get, I think most of the time when we talk about malaria, we usually just say, yeah, fever here. Someone would say, yeah, but I'm experiencing a bit of pain at my joints. And then that's it. You go to a hospital, or sad thing is some people would just go to a chemist, get the medication, come back home, and everything is good, and stop the medication. So the question is, fine, the information is already here. We're talking about malaria. Here we are. But then again, there's still hesitancy, and especially the aspect of going to a hospital once you notice, what, something might not be right, especially when it comes to the endemic regions. Should we then change tacts in terms of then getting, for example, community health workers, getting some nurses to just go visit homes? I think this is something that is already happening, especially in the lake endemic regions. Like I happen to come from. We engage community health volunteers to go to the households and test within the households. If you get a positive case in the household, you treat if it's uncomplicated malaria. Now there comes a difference between severe malaria and uncomplicated malaria. Absolutely.
For severe malaria, the community health volunteers have to refer the clients to seek further treatment from the health facilities. This includes pregnant women, children under 1 year, and that really helps in order to understand how to treat this disease. Yeah. For uncomplicated malaria, it helps reduce the burden in the facilities, so that you can have that workload. Most of the people don't go to the facilities because when they go there, they find long queues, and that is what people are afraid of.
That's true.
Yeah. And self-treatment. They go to the chemists. They want to self-prescribe the medicines. What they do not understand is you have to get tested, then get treated. The reason for this is because you create that resistance. You treat yourself, maybe you don't have malaria, because some of these things are like for COVID. The same symptoms for COVID are the same symptoms maybe for malaria. So people need to understand that you have to get tested first, then
get the right diagnosis, and get treated at the same time. All right. And of course, according to the World Health Organization, the theme really for the year as far as World Malaria Day is concerned, that is harness innovation to reduce malaria disease burden and as well as save lives. So the question is innovation, harnessing, innovation. Of course, I'd want to understand as a country where we at. At some point we've had a case of spraying, using drones, just to make sure that we have some aspect of vector control. So how effective, is that? Of course, would also be looking to get answers from the same. But I'm not sure if Dr. George, you can hear me, Dr. Prosper, as well as Lynette on Zoom. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, very well. Okay. So, Dr. George, let me just begin with you. As far as the country, the steps that we've taken just to make sure that, we reduce the cases of malaria over time that is in the country. What would you say has been some of the successful, methods put in place just to make sure that we combat this disease?
Okay, thank you. And I'm glad to be in this show today morning. And I'm really happy to see, the Malaria Youth Army, talk like healthcare workers, really well informed about how to prevent and treat malaria. In Kenya, the decline in the disease burden can be attributed to the traditional methods that we've used to control malaria, distributing insecticide-treated mosquito nets, encouraging all, especially the ones living in malaria transmission zones, counties, to sleep under the net, the whole family, to sleep under the mosquito net every night and use it correctly. We do indoor residual spraying in 2 counties, Migori and Homa Bay, that has also seen those counties have a reduction in disease burden, quite a lot. And what my colleague has said from the Malaria Youth Army, encouraging people to seek treatment at a health facility as soon as they have any signs and symptoms. That could be malaria or anything else. The signs from malaria could be the same as any other infectious diseases, a flu, for example. The fever, the headache, the joint aches. you do realize that when you seek treatment promptly, you do not always protect yourself against severe malaria, in case it's malaria you have, but also you cut the transmission of the malaria-causing parasites, because as we know, mosquitoes do not cause malaria. They transmit malaria from one person who has it to a person who doesn't have it. So when you have people living with malaria, then the mosquito has a reservoir from where it can act as a reservoir from where the mosquito can be able to spread the parasite from. In as far as innovations, which is the theme for this year, we are happy that Kenya was one of the 3 African countries that piloted the malaria vaccine. In Kenya, we have over 275,000 children who've received at least one dose of the 4 doses. As being introduced as a pilot, we were able to demonstrate that the vaccine is acceptable, it is safe, and it's feasible to be administered. And most importantly, it offers a protection against cases of malaria and also development of severe malaria amongst the children who are most vulnerable to adverse outcomes of malaria. This vaccine, the children who are eligible are children at 6 months old, because they get 4 doses. The first dose when they're 6 months old, second dose when they're 7 months old, third dose when they're 9 months, and the 4th dose when they're 2 years old or 24 months old. And then also, none of this, I think importantly to say, none of what I've listed, including the vaccine, is by itself enough to be able to protect and control malaria. And that was one of the reasons for piloting this vaccine. We wanted to find out mothers or guardians or parents who children had received vaccines. Would their parents or guardians, make them sleep less under mosquito nets because of the protection that they are receiving from the vaccine? And we saw that did not reduce. So the message is usually every additional intervention that we have does not mean that you do not use the other interventions. If a child has already received the malaria vaccine, it does not mean that the mother should not say that the child cannot get malaria. If the child is feeling unwell, then they should still be taken to a health facility, tested for malaria. If they are malaria treated, if it's not malaria, then diagnose what the problem could be. I think lastly also is to highlight the issue of the community health volunteers that you've talked about. They have really contributed a lot to the reduction of the disease burden, especially in the lake endemic counties that were highlighted earlier, due to the fact that they're able to capture malaria cases early. As we said, generally where there is a delay health-seeking behavior, the community health volunteers go to households. When they find anyone who has any signs and symptoms of malaria, they test them, they treat if it's uncomplicated. If it's negative or severe malaria, they refer to health facilities. And also very importantly, they refer, if they find any woman who's pregnant within that household, they encourage them, they refer them to the nearest health facility to be able to start attending antenatal clinic early. Pregnant mothers living in malaria transmission zones do get a free mosquito net at their first antenatal clinic visit, because again of the vulnerability of pregnant mothers to adverse outcomes of malaria. But they do also receive a drug, what we call SP, a once-a-month dose that is able to protect them against getting malaria throughout the duration of pregnancy, and also, ensure that this mother is able to have a child at term, a child who's healthy, a child who's of the correct, birth weight, and the mother is protected again from, like for example, maternal mortality or complications associated with pregnancy.
All right. Thanks, Dr. George. Of course, let's take a quick break, sort out a bit, as far as Zoom is concerned, and then we'll continue with the conversation after the break. So stay with us. This is Your World. More still to come in the second hour of the show. Stay with us. All right, welcome back. Glad you're still with us. The show is Your World, and today it's all about tackling the malaria burden. But of course, before we delve further into the conversation, remember we promised you every half-hour update as far as what's happening in the event, and that is mourning of fallen statesman. That is former President Mwai Kibaki. And like we said, our reporters are stationed across different parts in the country just to give us updates. So, Olive, who do we have so far?
All right, we are joined by Kennedy Mureithi, who joins us from Parliament's precincts. Kennedy, some of the pictures Leila Mohammed has shared showed people have already begun to queue. What are some of their sentiments? What has caused them to take the time out to pay tribute to the late Mwai Kibaki in this fashion?
Well, a very good morning to you, Olive, and Winnie there in the studio. And I'm liking that conversation that Winnie is having, and with regards to malaria. You know, so many people have always thought that malaria has gone, but it is not gone. And actually, I have learned a thing or two that I will apply in my family. But back to your question, is that people actually started streaming in at around 7 o'clock, and the lines are not getting any smaller. But remember, just as you have said, is that there is that mystery about what is happening and what does lying in state mean, and the mystery of this whole building and the precincts of parliament that not so many Kenyans are accustomed to. They do not know what is this that happens. Others are coming in not just to view the body, but also to see what is happening at this parliamentary place. Remember, parliament is a protected area, and even photography is one of the things that is actually prohibited. So most of the people that are coming in here are actually coming in not just to view the body, but also to unravel this mystery. But they're not given too much time. You will notice, if my camera person Jane Gatweri will be able to show you, you'll realize that as people are coming in, they are holding their belts, and this is because they are removing their belts as they are being scanned. On the other side, there's a tent that has been set just outside the mausoleum where people are coming in to get this feel of what is happening, but the security is actually very tight, just to make sure that everything that is happening as per precision, and to make sure that those people that are coming in are not coming in probably to do any harm or to do something that is against the law. So this is what has been happening, and the numbers are going as far as at the gate of the KICC on the other side, as more and more Kenyans are coming in, some of them just to make sure that they do come in before they go to work, or others will be coming in during the day. Remember, this viewing is starting at 7 o'clock and ending at 5 o'clock, and this is just but the second day. Most of the dignitaries, including President Uhuru Kenyatta, came here yesterday, and we also saw his deputy, and most of the leadership of this country came in yesterday, and today we do expect probably Kenyans will be coming in, and anybody else probably from another country who probably feels like they were touched by President Mwai Kibaki will want to come in and also just see what is happening. And on this other side, security is still tight. Even the vehicles that are being allowed into this particular Parliament Road are those that have been cleared by security. So this whole place, mostly Olive, has been taken over by the military, but today we are seeing less and less of them, and now the Kenya Police and officers from the National Youth Service who've come in, and they are probably making sure that the traffic flow is okay, the people flow is okay, and everything else. But on the inside, there is not so much that is happening. People are coming in, taking at least, let's say, if at most 30 seconds to view the body, then they leave on the other side as they also go on and see the photo gallery that we were able to see yesterday. But as it is right now, probably ungetuongelesha utuambie kwa nini umefika mapema hivi kuona mwili.
Naitwa Christopher Okindo, nimekuja kuona mwili wa mzee retired mzee Mwai Kibaki. So ndio tunapiga kwa heli, so tunafurahia sasa kila mtu anakuja kumuona siku ya leo.
Wewe mwenyewe kwa nini umepata huo msukumo ukafika mapema hivi, kama saa hii ni saa 3, kwa nini ukafika wewe mwenyewe ukasema lazima nimuone?
Juu leo nilikuwa karibu na kazi, mali nafanya kazi, kangoja nifike leo ndio nimuone sasa. Yeah. Wewe
Rais Mwai Kibaki alikuguza vipi kwa maisha yako?
Juu ni vile aliongoza Kenya kwa njia ya amani, juu kila mtu alikuwa na hakika, kila mtu juu ya sasa yeye alikuwa mtu wa heshima sana. Yeah. So
ukasema lazima uone.
Lazima nione mwili yake.
Na ushawahi fika bunge tena?
Ashaifika, ndio siku yangu ya kwanza, ndio nafurahia hivi. Sawa.
Asante Christopher. That is Christopher saying that President Mwai Kibaki was a respected man, and that is the reason why he has actually even come to town this early. So that is one of the sentiments that are also coming in from most Kenyans who believe that they should have and this is the last time they will be seeing him because the burial is on Saturday. But also remember, there will be a requiem mass at the Nyayo Stadium on Thursday, and the whole week is booked. And probably today, the government will be giving an update on what will be happening with regards to how far they have gone with plans on the burial and what else they need to know. Remember yesterday also his son, Jimmy Kibaki, telling us that he is ready to take up political position, and probably in the next 2 weeks he'll be declaring what position probably he will be vying for in the August election. So we are keeping tabs with what is happening, and my colleague Leila Mohammed, I have seen her talk to a number of military guys. I know in the next link she'll be telling us everything military and what is happening. Back to you, Olive, in studio.
Thank you very much, Kennedy, and we look forward to that. We'll be back at 9 a.m. in about, 50 minutes' time with full coverage of what is transpiring in Parliament, and also we'll hear from Kenyans across the country with our reporters who are stationed across the country. Winnie, as Kennedy said, he speaks a thing or two about malaria from your conversation, and I ask you to continue with it so that we can glean more.
Absolutely. Thank you very much, Olive, and of course and together with our journalists who are stationed in different places, across the country, just to give us an update. And of course, like Kennedy says, the government is supposed to give an update today as far as the burial preparations of the fallen president, that is the late President Mwai Kibaki. But for now, let's come back to the conversation, which is very, very important, for all of us to understand. And this is tackling the malaria burden that is in the country. Remember, yesterday, that is on 25th April, the world marks World Malaria Day. And of course, with a theme for this year, that is 2022, that is harnessing innovation. And this is, again, in the fight against malaria. So of course, we'd want to understand what are some of the innovative ways that we have implemented as a country. Has it borne fruits? And what do we need to do to make sure that, again, at the end of the year, we do not see any more deaths as far as malaria, which is preventable and treatable. And of course, back to my guest, and I will begin with you. Right here in studio, as far as there's something that you talked about earlier on, and that is, of course, the government has distributed, treated mosquito nets, thousands of nets that have been distributed. But here's the thing: as a country, we usually see people, once you receive the net, that's it. You don't wash it, you do not treat it again, and you just I see at the end of the day, the government said I should sleep under treated mosquito net, and that's it, right? So once someone receives their mosquito net, how often should they wash them? How often should they wash them in the first place? When it comes to treating them as well, what is that process like?
I believe when you get the mosquito net, the first process is you have to put it out there in the sun for it to, under a shade, for it to dry up.
All right.
Then you can get to use the net inside the house. When it gets dirty, I believe people have different timings on when the net can get dirty.
That's true.
Yeah. So you get to wash it with a bar soap. Not any other soap, not the Omos and whatever.
Yeah.
You use a bar soap to wash the nets.
Okay.
When it gets torn, you just take a needle, repair the net.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
For guys who receive nets and they do not use the nets, what we do as the young people, we have compiled messages telling them that this is the right way to use the net. This is how you hang it. Using animation, that is what we want to do. Like we create an animation of, this is how a net is supposed to be hung in the house. Maybe you don't have a bed, because you'll find households are different. You'll find one household has a bed, so it is easier for them to put the nets in the beds. And then you'll find people sleeping on the ground with their mattresses. So we have to find a way of educating those people that it's really important to sleep under a net.
Okay.
So one of the ways, as young people, we have devised messaging in terms of animations, in terms of text, in terms of flyers to distribute to those people in the endemic regions, so that they can be able to understand what these nets are for, how to treat the nets, how to wash the nets, and how to repair the nets. This is in conjunction with the community health volunteers. They are doing that already. They walk house to house every other month, educating on how to use these nets. It's very important when you give the messaging to the people, not just giving them the nets, so that they can be able to understand I've received this, so what am I supposed to do with it? So that we can be able to eliminate this disease. So that is very important.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Of course, there's usually the question of communicating to the people in a way that they understand. And you know, as a young people, sometimes our messaging could not. Sometimes it's very difficult, for some people to understand. So I want to believe that you use a language that people understand.
Yes, you have to look at the target audience.
Okay.
Yeah. For example, for people living in the Western region, you have to devise ways in which you can get the message to them. Yesterday during the World Malaria Day, we had the Sikuti guys compiling songs on how to get that message out there. Maybe through the dance, through the skits. Just making sure that the message goes to the people.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Something that they can understand.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Thanks, John. Young people, use the message that people can understand. All right. And of course, let's speak to Dr. Prosper Chaki, who is Executive Director at the Pan-African Mosquito Control Association, that is PAMCA. It's so good to see you, Dr. Prosper, this morning. Thank you for joining us. Of course, the question that I ask you today is, as far as, the theme for this year's World Malaria Day, and that is on harnessing innovation to reduce the malaria disease burden, as well as save lives, right? As far as the aspect of vector control, because like I said earlier on, we've had this message of sleep under mosquito nets, if there are bushes, make sure that you clear the bushes and all those things. But then again, it's not working according to how we want it to work, because at the end of the day, we still have new infections, we still have new deaths from malaria. So when it comes to then innovating in that aspect of vector control, what do you say needs then to be done more? And what has been happening, over the years that is not working, that you feel maybe it's time for us to change tact?
Okay, thank you very much, Winnie, and great being here as well. First of all, as George has said, I really want to commend the Youth Army and Kenya in general for making this quite an important achievement, engaging the youth. And when you look at the current situation of the disease in most of sub-Saharan Africa countries, most of the burden is being borne, like at least the symptomatic disease is being borne by the school-age children, which means even if you have strategies targeting the pregnant women and infants, you have a big part of the population, and in Africa, the youth constitute, the school-age children constitute about 50% of the population, which means we really have to have strategies and tools to target this particular group of the population, because otherwise our strategies will not bear the fruits that we expect. So, but as of now, since the Abuja Declaration and many other efforts that have emerged, there's been a rollout of a lot of interventions, targeting the vectors. George has spoken about LLINs, the long-lasting insecticide-treated nets, because as opposed to what we used to do back in the ages, where every time one had to go and buy an insecticide packet to retreat the bed nets, now we have a technology where you get a bed net for 2 years, you don't have to retreat it, and it still gives you the protective efficacy. So, but what has happened over the years, and we see it with the changing epidemiology of the disease, that the scenarios like resistance, the mosquitoes have developed resistance, and this is very much spread across the continent, and very much true for Kenya as well. In those areas where the disease is prevalent, the vectors had resistance to some of the standard bed nets, which most of them, they were made from pyrethroids, insecticides. And that is why now we are going for the next generation bed nets. So we keep on embracing innovations years and years. But I think what has been missing is, one, in terms of how we're not able, for at least most of the African countries, we're not embracing the whole set of interventions in the spectrum, like the whole spectrum of interventions or tools available. We tend to be focusing on IRS or LLINs, which mostly target the adult mosquitoes. And we are not doing much at targeting mosquitoes at source. And I think the CS yesterday gave a very remarkable note of what do we do at targeting the mosquitoes at source. And I also commend Kenya for making that move already, piloting larval source management, because then what you're actually doing is making sure that you're just not sitting and waiting for the mosquitoes to become adults and with full strength to attack the community, the people, but rather you have strategies that will be targeting at identifying the sources of mosquito breeding, and also targeting them at source before they even emerge. What that would also do is have a little bit of contribution on reducing the vector population. In so doing, you will also be able automatically to reduce the disease. But again, I think the other innovation that we best need is, as my colleague in the studio said, we need strategies that do allow the optimization of interventions. And optimization has two ends. One is optimizing the efficacy of the interventions, that your intervention is protecting the people, is giving you the benefit as you would. And the other way is optimization in terms of community uptake. So we are struggling with bed net coverage, even when we have 80% coverage of the entire at-risk communities, but use is always very low, that not everyone sleeps under bed net. So we need best innovations in terms of the strategies. How do we communicate? How do we engage the communities? And I think we are, for Kenya, the program has started very well by engaging the youth. This is one group that is very challenging in terms of reaching out to it and really targeting with the more effective interventions. But the other group, of which the Pan-African Mosquito Control Association is very much committed to engaging, is the women. The majority of the people that are affected, and if you look at the WHO reports, and I believe the malaria indicator surveys in Kenya, mostly the pregnant women and under 5 children, this is the group that is mostly affected. But what are we doing to protect this? So we have interventions. When George was talking about IPTP, for instance, the uptake of IPTP has always been a challenge. How many people actually get even 2 doses of IPTP during their pregnancy? So the coverage has always been an issue. You talk about interventions like targeting the under 5s, the infants, the IPTI. Is Kenya underway to implement IPTI? But what proportion of this eligible group is accessing this particular intervention? So until we have strategies and tools that can be optimized in terms of, first, the efficacy, the effectiveness, and the coverage, we have a long, a high mountain to climb. And I believe, as George had said, none of these tools would be able to drive the countries to elimination. Lastly, just finishing up with what we see in the vectors. So as we speak in most countries, and I believe it's the same in Kenya, where the countries are experiencing malaria transmission, so the vector population. So the tools that we have used over the years, over the 2 decades, they have been very successful at eliminating the very predominant vectors back then, which is the Anopheles species, specific Anopheles species, that were biting indoors and resting indoors. But now you have species that are remaining and are sustaining the transmission, that are biting outdoors and resting outdoors, which means if they are biting outdoors and resting outdoors, you have outdoor transmission scenario, of which majority of the people, including the youth, spending most of the times outdoors. Fishermen along the lake zones, spending most of the time out there. They don't have access to bed nets. They cannot use bed nets while fishing. They cannot use bed nets while watching football, which is very a liked sport for many. So what do we do under these circumstances? So it's about understanding what is the existing evidence and what do you do in your space to make sure that you optimize the tools that you have and to harness the full spectrum of tools that are available out there.
Okay. All right. Let me quickly speak to Lynette before we go on a break, because Lynette, you, again, have like a personal, experience as far as malaria is concerned, and not once, but twice, once. So can we just go back to what exactly happened, because you almost lost your life?
Yeah. Thank you so much. I'm happy to be here. My experience with malaria wasn't that good. Last year, 2021, I was pregnant with my twins, and at around 5 months, I had malaria, and it was really severe. I could not access medical help. And also some myths around here. My friends discouraged me, oh, if you take these medicines, you might miscarry. So I ended up not taking the medicines, and this really posed threat to my health and my twins. I nearly miscarried, but at the end I got help, and I thank God for the medical attention I got, and I had my twins at term. And today I use that story to enlighten my fellow young mothers and other women to really, really seek medical attention, and not to hear about these hearsays about medical health. It's your health, it's your responsibility. So change begins from us. Yeah, and therefore I'm really happy right now I'm here today, and I've taken that initiative to enlighten other women, about seeking medical attention. Yes.
And I can understand, especially during pregnancy, of course, you just want everything to go well. And of course, your primary focus as a mother really is just to make sure that, your child, that is unborn child, it's okay. So when it comes to, because like you said earlier, that you did not have access. So is it more of you did not have access, or you were scared to go to a hospital? Because again, you're pregnant, you do not want to, and we all know when you're pregnant, you're told don't take this, don't take that, you cannot take this medication because it might harm the child.
At first, I didn't have access to the medicines. When I went for my antenatal clinics, the medicines were not available. And then later when I accessed the medicines, again, now there's this other part of myths and hearsays, so I didn't take the medicines again. And this really, really was a threat on my health.
All right.
Yeah.
And how bad was it in terms of your symptoms? Was it, a case of severe malaria, or this at the time?
It was severe, and what can I say? But by that time, pregnancy sometimes it can really take a toll on your, how can I say, your moods and everything. And I wasn't really that keen to check on the symptoms. But later, after getting that medical help, I was sensitized about this and this. Sometimes we really assume everybody knows about the symptoms of malaria. Sometimes when you get these symptoms, you might just go over the counter, take some painkillers, and that's it.
All right.
But later, after being enlightened, I was able to, though it was really severe.
Okay.
And today I'm happy. I'm here with my babies. Yeah, and I'm taking initiative to make sure they're sleeping inside treated mosquito nets.
Okay.
Yeah, and anytime I'm seeing the symptoms, the first thing I rush to a medical facility.
Okay, I like that. I like what you're saying. You got enlightened, really, as far as what you are supposed to do. So we're going to take a break. But of course, when we come back, Dr. George, there's something that Lynette has mentioned, and also Dr. Prosper talked about, and that is the aspect of access. All right, access to either healthcare facility or medication, just treatment in general, and of course the tools that are needed just to make sure that, again, that we combat malaria. But for now, let's take a break, and of course we'll leave you with pictures. This is live pictures. Remember, like we said, we'll be giving you half-hour updates as far as morning, really, Kenya's third president, that is the late President Mwai Kibaki. And of course, there we go, live pictures from Parliament, where of course people are lining up just to pay their last respects. We have, of course, for Kenyans, number of Kenyans really just passing through. And remember, you cannot take too much time because there's a lot of people who want to pay their last respect over there. And of course, we can see the military, of course, taking charge, facing away from the body, and of course slightly bowing down. This is a sign of honor, and that is to Kenya's third president. And from, of course, Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, that is the late President Mwai Kibaki. So, of course, we'll leave you with those pictures. We'll be back with more conversation as far as malaria is concerned. And then later on, our reporter, of course, we'll be linking up with our reporters who are on ground, as well as Olive Barrows will be here with us as well, just to give us updates on the same. But there you go. Number of Kenyans just paying their last respects to our fallen president, that is President Mwai Kibaki. See you after the short break. All right, welcome back. And of course, we are in the last phase of this conversation as far as tackling the malaria burden is concerned. And like we said when we started the show, 260,000 deaths. This is as far as children under the age of 5 is reported, you know, and of course, in the country, over 3 million new clinical cases of malaria are actually reported annually. So this tells you that we are not out of the woods yet, and we all need to take our individual responsibilities just to make sure that we tackle this. Again, we are on the road towards zero malaria. So the question is, will we ever achieve that? Okay, given, you know, what we are seeing now as far as the different, you know, rates of infection in different parts of the world as far as malaria is concerned. And of course, there's something that I do not want to lose. And Dr. George, I want to engage you on the same. And this is an aspect of access, either access to treatment, access to mosquito nets, access to, you know, almost everything that is needed just to make sure that we reduce the number of new infections in the country. Again, where are we at as a country, really? Because clearly there seems to be a problem.
Thank you. Yes, first to answer your first thought is that yes, it's possible to eliminate malaria in the country. As you said in your introductions, the burden has reduced by 50% between 2010 and 2020. And if we accelerate our momentum, you know, and bring in more innovative interventions, then indeed, by the year 2030, we can be able to achieve elimination. The second thing about access is that you'll remember that when COVID, you know, came in 2020, there was a lot of disruption in global supply chains. There was, you know, variation in the prices of commodities. Actually, this saw us, we had planned to have mass net distribution campaign in the year 2020. This was pushed to the year 2021. Last year, we distributed about 60 million LLINs to, you know, protect around in 27 counties, which will protect around 25 million Kenyans from malaria. We did have, you know, some disruption, like for example, in our rapid diagnostic test kits supply and some treatments. And that, you know, led us, together with all our stakeholders, you know, of course, led by the president, this is the president's Big Four agenda, to see how can we be able to source these items locally. And for example, during this year in February, we did see Kenya Medical Research Institute launch a malaria rapid diagnostic kit that has been developed and is being produced in the country, and that would buffer us from, you know, relying on importing all our malaria diagnostic commodities. And this kit is currently, it's been approved by a Pharmacy and Poisons Board. It's undergoing WHO pre-qualification. We do have a local manufacturer again who's WHO pre-qualified and who's producing the first-line treatment for anti-malarial medication. So yes, during the COVID pandemic, there was some disruption in availability of commodities, but this has since been recovered. And we've made sure that our community health workers and our health facilities have enough commodities as we proceed on. The other thing also I'd like to highlight is on the issue of, uptake of these interventions. And that's why, the clarion call of Zero Malaria starts with me. Zero Malaria starts with you, Zero Malaria starts with all of us, is that even when these commodities are available, even when we give these mosquito nets, even when we have our diagnostic and treatment commodities at our health facilities, they still have to be taken up. And that has been a challenge in using this the right way. As you've often heard, sometimes people use mosquito nets for the purposes that they are not intended.
That's true.
As greenhouses, to protect their poultry, as curtains, for example. And that is where the youth come in. That is where the community health workers come in very strongly to be able to mobilize communities to know that, for you, having the commodities in hospital is not enough. You have to go there as soon as you feel unwell, get properly diagnosed and treated. The vaccine being there, again, the mothers have to take their children to be able to get vaccinated. And that is where that Zero Malaria, starts with me campaign. I think as I finish, and this again was highlighted yesterday, is that as Africa, especially Sub-Saharan Africa, it is again upon us to be able to take the lead in the fight against malaria. 95% of all malaria cases globally occur in Africa, and 96% of all malaria deaths globally again occur in Africa. And as other countries outside Africa progress towards elimination of malaria, there's a very, very big risk that, malaria might become an African-only problem. And therefore, we need to be in tandem with the rest of the world. We've seen a lot of countries eliminating malaria within our lifetimes. We have seen China eliminating malaria. We have seen Cuba eliminating malaria. We have some African countries that have also eliminated malaria. And for us is to learn from them. How did they, combine all these interventions, use them in an optimal manner, targeting the right people to be able to achieve that elimination. And that, again, we cannot be able to achieve as a country alone. We have to work as a region, like the East Africa Community or IGAD, these regional economic communities, because we cannot fight malaria. We are not an island. So if we fight malaria very well in Kenya and Uganda, that is not happening. There is movement of people across the border. There is movement of the mosquitoes across the border. So again, we have to do it as a concerted effort. Thank you.
Okay, I hear you. All right, but Lynette, just paint a picture for us, because I think, like we said earlier on, when we talk about malaria, we usually just talk about it on a superficial level in terms of, I had a few symptoms here, I went to the hospital, or I just got medication from the chemist, and, here I am today. But really, you suffered, severe malaria. Paint a picture for us. What does that look like when someone says, I have severe malaria?
At first, I didn't know I had malaria. I was feeling a very severe headache, my joints, I was vomiting. And maybe I thought these are just some of the side effects of maybe pregnancy in my trimester. But later, as we say, it's really important to go get tested once you really can't identify with the symptoms. So I decided to go get tested first. And when I realized it was malaria, and too bad it was already late. I had stayed like some days, some few weeks. By the time I was going to the hospital, actually even the doctor told me, like, you're really lucky. If you could have stayed longer, maybe it could have been fatal. And therefore, I really encourage fellow women who are pregnant or having children under 5 just to really, really be very keen and take initiatives of seeking medical attention. Yeah.
All right. And how different was your treatment process? Go ahead.
Yes, and I was saying in access, when you're talking about access, there's one thing that we really having here at the community. One category who are able to access the super nets, and they're not using it for the intended purposes, as my colleague has said. And there's the other category that really don't have access to the nets. For my case, by then, when I was going for my antenatal clinics, there were not nets. By then, they told me they're out of stock by then. And therefore, I had to stay my entire 3 trimesters without the net. And as you know, COVID really posed a really big effect on our economic status. I couldn't afford a super net by then. And at the clinic, there were no nets. So I had to go the entire journey without. So It was really God, let me say by then, but it's good to begin and seek attention, medical attention.
Okay. And then as far as your treatment is concerned, because again, you're pregnant, you have to make sure that you protect your baby in as much as you can. So how different was your treatment?
Pardon?
So how different was, your treatment process as far as, medication, the kinds of medication that you are, supposed to take, for example, the kind of dosage, because like I said earlier on, when it comes to pregnancy, you have to be careful because you want to protect the mother and the child as well.
For the treatment at first, I can't say it was that smooth. One thing I can recommend to the medical facilities, they really should advise these pregnant mothers or rather pregnant women on which kind of medication is safe to them at that particular time. Because at first when I was, the medication I was given late after inquiry, I was told it's really, really, it's really strong for my babies at that time because I was just 5 months old and therefore I didn't take them. And maybe that's why the effect was that intense. And therefore we should really get that support and advice from professionals on which kind of treatment is safe at which particular time in your pregnancy journey. Yeah.
All right. And I think just reassure women, and pregnant mothers, that it is safe, to go to a hospital and get the correct and effective treatment, really, as far as malaria is concerned. Because like you said earlier on from your friends, they're like, you're pregnant. No, you can't, you can't take certain medications. But Dr. Prosper, let me come back to you, because earlier on you talked about the importance of having, the tools that is required to make sure that we fight malaria and just make sure that we achieve the zero malaria by 2030. So my question is then again, so what role do development partners play in making sure that, number one, we are using the correct tools, and of course, as far as innovation is concerned, we're harnessing innovation just to make sure that we tackle malaria, but also number two, on the road towards achieving zero malaria by 2030. What role do development partners play then?
Well, I'm not sure I'm audible enough, but I think if I was to research your question is what role do the development partners have?
Yes.
I think it's, I always want to I wouldn't want to start with what the development partners have, the role that they have to play, but I think it's what role do local agencies, first of all, have in terms of making sure that we come up with innovation that can be supported? Because the development partners are there, they will support the innovation process. They can fund, but that is just one part of it. I think what we need for us to be able to attract this, there has to be local commitment.
All right.
Local commitment from the communities, local commitment from our innovators, local commitments from our governments. And this is only then that we'll be able to attract the commitment from the funders or the bilateral partners.
All right. So when you say local commitment, when you say local commitment, what exactly do you mean? Because again, different people might say, but yeah, but we have tried, So when we say you need commitment from local agencies, what exactly does that look like?
Okay. So for me, I think it starts like we want to promote innovations. Let's say there's quite a lot of wide ideas amongst the youth in our generations. People have different ideas, they have different innovations in place. Do they have access to funding to advance these innovations? Do they have access to platforms that would advance their innovation? Do we have platforms for supporting them? How many governments within our continent actually putting substantial funding supporting these cultivations of ideas? So I think it is, one is monetary commitment from our governments, but again, creating a conducive environment for the youth of these generations, for people in our continent to more effectively contribute. And yes, there are countries within the continent that are doing better in terms of investing in innovations, but majority of our countries are not doing better. We still have a long way to go. But I think what the main role that what I see the bilateral partners to be able to.
All right, Dr. Chaki seems to have a bit of an issue with your audio over there, but let me throw it very quickly to Dr. George before I come back to John here in studio. As far as then that aspect of commitment, which is very, very important, I know the government has made a commitment, to set aside 800 million shillings, and this is in the fight against malaria. But let's just quickly talk about the RTSS vaccine. Of course, the WHO has recommended an upscale of the same. So I just want to understand in the country, because this, again, good news, and this is as far as vaccine manufacturers, like Pfizer committing to, maybe we can try and come up with, malaria vaccine using the RNA, mRNA technology. So, of course, as a country, and Dr. George, where we at, what are some of the plans to upscale the, the rollout of the vaccine, then, let's say, to almost every child?
So thank you. Before I answer that question, I'd also like to highlight, something that asked earlier about treatment of malaria in pregnancy, whether it is different from non-pregnant women. I think it's recommended from the second trimester. The treatment for malaria in pregnancy is exactly the same as for other members of the population, where the drugs are, easy to take, they're tolerable, and they're highly efficient. In the first trimester is where the treatment is a bit different, because the AAL that we use has not been approved to treat malaria in the first trimester, and that is why, some clients, some pregnant mothers may say, the drug has, some bit of adverse events that are more than the drugs that we routinely use, but they're still as effective in treating malaria. But the emphasis is on, being able to protect the pregnant mother from getting malaria, from the outset. The second thing also to highlight is also on the role that development partners play. We do have strong partner commitments, I think, in our country, especially from USAID, the US President's Malaria Initiative, from the Global Fund for AIDS, TB, and malaria, other technical support from WHO, and other UN agencies, amongst many others. We work in partnership even with AMREF, Health Africa. And these commitments from those partners and increased resource allocation from the National Ministry of Health, from the National Treasury, and also from the counties, because health is a devolved function. We've also seen, especially the counties where malaria is endemic, increase their resources for health and increase their resources specifically for malaria. And importantly, even for the community health workers who have said are very critical to being able to diagnose and treat malaria early. The vaccine that was approved for widespread use of malaria is the RTSS vaccine, being manufactured by GSK. It is the first malaria vaccine and only one so far to have been approved for and recommended for widespread use. In the areas where it was being implemented as a pilot, we will continue implementing it. We have been able to secure, funding, from the Gavi Alliance and other partners to be able to scale this vaccine up. I would put it, scale it up gradually. First, there were counties that, where it was being piloted, or facilities where it was being piloted, sub-counties that piloted. And then you had what we call comparator areas, the areas where we were comparing to be able to see, is this vaccine effective, safe, etc. So those would be the first ones to be, prioritized. And as more vaccines become available, because again, the demand for this vaccine is quite high, the manufacturers may not be able to have enough vaccine, even if resources were available to manufacture, to give all the children who are eligible right now. As they become available, we will, as a country, we follow the recommendations. As a ministry, we follow the recommendations of what we call the Kenya National Immunization Technical Advisory Group that will recommend to us how do we scale up the implementation of this vaccine based on the resources, based on the need, based on the doses available, to a point where eventually each and every child who is eligible, each and every child who is living in a malaria transmission zone gets this vaccine. So that is something that we will continue to push for. We will continue to inform as as we continue scaling up this vaccine.
All right. Okay. So I can see our time is far much spent, literally 4 minutes to end the show. So I'll begin with you, John. Here in studio, of course, we know young people are very creative, very dynamic. So when it comes to then innovating other ways of, contributing really towards the fight against malaria, what would you say? And I'll give you literally 45 seconds for the same. Yes.
I think through art, we can be able to showcase our commitment towards the end of malaria.
Yeah.
We have pledge songs, we have poems, we have skits, we have choral songs towards us eliminating malaria. We showcased that, I think, yesterday during the World Malaria Day celebrations in Kakamega.
Okay.
And I think that is what, as young people, we push the message out there to make sure that everybody is aware of our goal to eliminate malaria by 2030.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. This hope. I like that optimism. All right, Lynette, what would you say? You've had, an experience, and especially with the severe case of malaria, almost lost, your life and your babies as well. But here you are today, just sharing your experience and empowering people by the same. So what would you say, or what would you want, especially pregnant women, to understand really as far as malaria is concerned? Very briefly, 45 seconds.
I'd like to tell pregnant women that they should really join this fight against malaria, because zero malaria actually begins with me and you. We've really left the burden to the government, and therefore we should take this initiative, join the fight, and let's be the change we want to see. Women, we are the most vulnerable, we are the most affected because we are the caregivers, and therefore let's join this fight. Let's sensitize our families, our communities, and at the end, let's live with the hope of seeing Kenya malaria-free.
Okay. Thank you very much, Lynette, over there. And of course, Dr. Chaki, of course, we all know the Global Fund is like the biggest funder, really, as far as malaria, HIV, is concerned. And of course, what they said just recently is that we need to stay ahead of the game. So what does this staying ahead of the game really mean as far as, the fight against malaria, very quickly?
So staying ahead of the game, again, my apologies that my connection is very poor where I am. But staying ahead of the game is understanding all the challenges that I highlighted earlier on in terms of what the vector behaviors changes that we have, the changes in epidemiology from the scientific point of view, and what strategies do we have. And I'd said earlier when I was starting my careers that the vectors are always very smart. So like they tend to be changing tactics. It's just you are in a war, and the enemy will always change tactics depending on how you launch your strategies. So just as in a war, the scientists, the professionals, the communities, we all have to be engaging and be mindful in the engagement.
Okay.
But staying ahead of the game again means we need to be fully loaded and with all the resources to be able to deploy the interventions timely and in a more appropriate manner.
All right. Thank you very much, Dr. Chaki. And of course, Dr. Jez, let me, finish with you as far as that commitment by the government. And what do you foresee, let's say, come next year, during the World Malaria Day? What are some of the things that you expect to see, as a country in our efforts to end malaria?
Yes, we expect to see further progress, I think, with the coming in of the malaria youth army, with the coming in of the malaria vaccine, the coming in of the newer technology, mosquito nets, scale up of the larva source management, and most importantly, a sensitization of people. Everyone knowing that zero malaria starts with me, with you, with all of us. We expect to report much further progress, and we expect to say that we are on course towards eliminating malaria in Kenya by the year 2030.
All right. And of course, we'll hold you to that. And come next year, God willing, of course, we'll be speaking the same message, is that we are on course, and that is in the fight against malaria. So that is where we, end the show this morning right here on Your World. So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your time this morning. I know most of you are still in Kakamega. John had to travel, overnight just to come here. So we say thank you. We don't really take that for granted. And of course, we hope that you've learned a lot from today's conversation. And this is as far as ending malaria malaria, it begins with me, it begins with you. It takes a collective effort so that we end malaria by 2030. All right, so my name is Winnie Lubembe. Enjoy the rest of your viewing, but of course our wall coverage as far as the events leading up to the burial of the third president of Kenya, that is President Mwai Kibaki, continues with Olive Barrows, and of course she is here. So Olive, I throw it to you. Of course, I understand we have our reporters in different parts of of the country just to give us an update. So Olive, what do you have?
All right, thank you very much, Winnie. I think you put it very well. We have wall-to-wall coverage of the late retired President Mwai Kibaki's final journey, and I'll see you on the other side with more.